Welcome to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm Kiran Kumar, founder and host of You're Not Invisible After 50. Despite the title, you don't have to be over 50 to listen to this podcast. No matter whether you're 25, 45, or 65, we can all learn lessons from each other to help us build a better, more fulfilled life. Come listen to the inspiring stories of all the phenomenal women over 50 who are kicking ass and making an impact. They are not invisible. I'm not invisible, and neither are you. So, no matter what society says, life doesn't end at 50. In fact, it's just beginning. Welcome to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm Kiran and host of this podcast. We're all about showcasing phenomenal women over 50 who are kicking ass and making an impact. You get to hear all their inspiring stories while you don't have to be invisible after 50. So sit back and enjoy the wonderful life story from this week's guest. My guest today is Preeta. Hi, Preeta. How are you?
Hi, Kiran. I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on the platform.
I'm so excited. My kind of width of this podcast is getting wider and wider and wider. We're going across the globe. We're in India. So I'm so happy that we have fellow females and fellow women from India who are not invisible after 50. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you again.
So let's kick off. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself to our listeners in one line about who you are. So wherever you want to start.
So hi everyone who's listening. I am Preeta, like Kiran mentioned. I've turned 60 a few months ago. I live solo and I've been single for the last 13 years of my life. I call myself a wholeness coach. I work with women who feel stuck in some emotional transition because that's been my journey.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. And I think we're going to go delve into that because we're going to talk about, our stories. So in this podcast, we're going to cover your life story, the past, the present, if there was a trigger at 50, and what the future looks like, followed on by the bonuses. So let's start at the beginning. Wherever you want to start in terms of the past, whatever you want to say, feel comfortable. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my story. I'd like to start by just mentioning that when I turned 30, I actually went into a depression of sorts because I felt that life had passed me by and I hadn't done a thing. However, when I turned 40, I felt a sense of freedom. I just felt that now that I'm 40, I can actually do what I feel like and I don't really have to care what people think or say about what I'm doing. By the time I turned 50, life had actually turned on its head because all that I had lived till that time. So at the age of 48, I took the decision of stepping out of my marriage, a marriage of 23 years, and a marriage for which I had actually fought with my parents to make it happen. But as my life in the marriage continued, I reached a point where I felt I had lost myself. I was a ghost of myself. I had stopped thinking, I had stopped expressing my views because I always felt misunderstood, not appreciated. And I felt that I was some kind of a misfit in the kind of environment I was living in. Things took a different turn, and like I said, in 48, I decided to step out, and that was very scary for the simple reason that one, I had no role model. Second, I was just stepping into the unknown. And stepping into the unknown is scarier than stepping into known potholes. And I had stayed in the marriage long enough to know that things are not going to change. And so from that time, it's been 13 years, and I've reinvented myself uh, position myself as a wholeness coach. I work with women primarily, and I work with women who are struggling to find emotional balance. And for me, I think that was a very powerful decision that I took. However, much the naysayers were trying to tell me that I was being foolish. But I guess sometimes in life, you have to be the fool. And this always reminds me of tarot card. If you're familiar with tarot card, there's one card which says the fool. And that image is always very, clear in my mind, because this is the fool who's standing at the edge of the cliff with a rose or a flower in one hand and looking up and stepping off the cliff. And the kind of path I took, it felt like that I didn't know where I was going, but there was some inherent trust in me that whatever I do, at least I am equipped to take care of myself. What is the worst case scenario? What all can go wrong? Even in the worst scenario, I'm educated enough, I'm confident enough, and I'm skilled enough to find something to, bring myself back to an even keel. And these 13 years have been a truly expansive learning, I would say a beautiful journey, actually. So if I hadn't taken that decision, I would never have become the person I am today, where I am a nomad. I have a vehicle where all my belongings fit, and I just sit in my car and I drive to my next destination. And where I'm going next, I have no idea. If somebody asks me, are you settled? My answer is, I have no idea. I don't know what it means to be settled. Because yes, for the moment I am, wherever I am. Where will I be a month down the line? I don't have a clue. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I think a lot of that resonates with myself as well in terms of the storyline. And as we have spoken before. So exactly the same, you go from the known to the unknown. And it's interesting what you say about the fool. I think the fool is the one who actually keeps where they are or stays where they are because there's no other choice. It's the one who is brave and brave-hearted who actually takes that step into the unknown, but has the faith that something's going to, or everything's going to work out for itself. And I think you and I have trod very similar paths in that sense, because I went from a marriage of 25 years, left at 52, and I was asked a question on a podcast just recently, how I felt about my life and what at 52 do I feel now, and I said liberated, and that is just like, the doors have opened, here comes I, and also whatever comes in the future, which is so exciting. And I think you discover yourself, and I think that's where you've been. There's discovering yourself, realizing that whatever you're going to do, you are not going to fail. You are not going to fall. You might trip. Hey, that's life, right? But you will move forward. And I think that's a great thing. And I love this thing about you being a nomad, because that's a dream for me, being a nomad. And I'm looking to uproots again in September. So again, it's having that kind of faith that wherever you go, you're going to be okay. So thank you for sharing that with the listeners. I'm so glad. And as you said, there aren't role models around, right? So we need to be the role models for women of our own age group, but also younger as well. I mean, we're not advocating divorce. We're just saying be who you want to be and be seen. It's as simple as that, whether you're in a marriage or outside. So let's look at what are you doing currently then?
I do one-on-one coaching. I do group coaching. I also help people understand the value and the power of gratitude and forgiveness in our lives. And I organize courses, programs, retreats. That's what my work is. And I just enjoy life.
Well, I think that's a great place to be, is to enjoy life, because you only have one go at this, don't you, really? So you might as well make the most of it. Let's talk about, you said about 30, but was it any other trigger point at 50 that you had, or you may not have had one that you think, oh, I need to do something differently here.
So this whole point of my marriage breaking was the trigger, because having been married for 23 years, there were many points in that period where life seemed like a struggle, because there were incidents or occasions when one felt this is not working out. But I had kind of made peace, saying to myself that this is not as bad as many other women who go through bad marriages. So I'll just make my peace with it. But there was this time when I was nearing 50, I was late 50, 47, 45, 40, after 45 actually, when I started feeling that this is not going anywhere. And I reached a point where I said, I can't take it anymore. And in fact, I remember now when I look back, there were 2 years of my life after having taken the decision that I will step out. I felt I had stopped breathing, as if I was in some kind of a prison environment. And it was not to do with anybody else. It was my own what shall I say, um, feeling of separateness. Like I was not connected to anyone, and like you said, there was no one in my life. And when I was going through that phase, that dark phase of my life, I actually cut off from many people, because I felt that I'm tired of explaining what I'm going through. I'm tired of justifying what I'm feeling. I am feeling what I'm feeling. And there's no point in me spending my energy in trying to explain to the other person that I am justified. So I actually cut off myself from everyone. And when I stepped out at 48, I was very scared. I was very, very scared. Fortunately, I had a job. I had a good job. I was financially secure with a salary that was coming in. But I had very little savings apart from that, because I hadn't really had a very smooth career before that, because my career had actually shifted many times due to reasons, relocating and different situations. This decision that I will leave my job, my safe, secure corporate job, and venture into becoming an independent life coach with no support system, with no backup, I don't think I put too much thought in it. The only thing that came to my mind is, what can I do so that I can help women, and something which is not really dependent on anything beyond me? It's solely my responsibility. And as long as I'm alive, I can do that work. And life coaching appeared to be the next logical step, because even in my earlier avatar, I was a school teacher at some point. And as a teacher in a school in a small town, I would actually help the students, because they were from a small town. I was from a metropolitan city. I had different viewpoints, and I could help them see life from a different lens. So I built on that. I got myself certified while I was in my corporate job, thinking to myself that there will come a time when I will stop doing this, because the corporate job after some time started feeling meaningless. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, what purpose is it solving? It's just one tick in the box, basically to get a salary. And I thought to myself that if I was to not earn this salary, how long can I survive with what I have? And I told myself, of course, I have to bring my life together. I have to cut down on the frills and become absolutely conscious of my choices. Um, and I gave myself 3 years. I said, okay, 3 years, and I'm sure after that I'll be able to earn properly. Who knew the pandemic was going to happen then? But and the pandemic changed a lot of dynamics. But yes, so that was a decision that I took, which changed my life call, because then in 2016, without having a plan B, I left my job. That's another story for another day, of how that happened. But when I left my job, I gave myself, like I said, 3 years, and I traveled. So I went on a solo trip, uh, facing my fears. Because a solo trip where you have no one waiting for you at the other end, a lot of young girls are doing it today, but somebody of my age, uh, with the kind of background that we have of being, brought up with so many patriarchal views, so that was very, very, I would say, rejuvenating and like giving me courage, because I faced all kinds of situations which can happen on foreign travel, whether it's language, whether it is running short of money, whether it's getting lost and not having a roadmap to, to take you to the right place. But it brought in a lot of trust and a lot of faith that if I am operating from a good place, I will meet good people and I will have good experiences. And what you said earlier, I have been also very fortunate to have created a soul community around me. I call them my soul family. These are people who I have met in these last 13 years of my exploration, and they are my family now. I mean, I have a brother, I have cousins, I have relatives, but they don't really know this Preeta, who has stepped out of the norm and is leading a life which is very unusual. And I think the family just kind of looks at me from a distance, not really knowing what to make of it. What is she doing? How? Because to be single as a woman in India and to be happy and contented and fearless is not seen very commonly, and especially this nomadic existence. Like people are wondering, why am I not settling? And I think settling is a word that I have a little bit of an issue with because I don't. I mean, that I think that is where you block yourself if you just settle down and then you don't grow. So I like this freedom of growing. So yeah, I don't know if I really answered your question, but this is
You
what
did
happened.
actually, you did actually answer the question, and extremely well. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself. The the world is going to judge you regardless, right? Whoever they are, as I said the other day to somebody, Dunia's going to say what it's going to say, right? The world is going to say what it's going to say. People are going to look at you and think, oh, you're strange. But at the end of the day, you have to be happy in yourself. You have only one life, only certain choices, and you have to make them. And if you make them at the time where you are going to be a happy person and you're going to be content in your life, and you're not doing anybody any wrong. So I think, yeah, go for it. And it is rare. I mean, in India, it is rare. It's rare here. I mean, I was told even in the UK, you're leaving your husband at 52. Oh, hello. You're not in my life. You haven't experienced my life. I need to get out. But I, like yourself, Preeta, have grown in that time frame. And even though you've been single for 13 years, I've been single for about 7, I think. But even these 7 years have been remarkable. They've been liberating, and there's more to come. And I think you're showing women, not just in India, but also across the world, that you can be who you want to be and be content with it. And that's a really powerful message to put out there, because you do not have to accept the norm. What is the norm? They're constraints that have been put on by society. They're self-limiting. Why? Be who you want to be. So, well done you, I say.
I want to add one more point over here. When I stepped out, a lot of my friends, people who knew me, actually started questioning me. Have you thought of? Have you thought of financial stability? Have you thought of health? Have you thought of loneliness? Have you thought of how you will socialize, because people are wary of single women, And I would get defensive. I would try and explain to them that, like, this is better than what I was going through while I was still in the marriage. Till I learned a lesson. I learned that these questions are just reminders to me of my own fears. They're just a reflection. So, through a spiritual, what shall I say, reflection, I drop my fear of future, because the fear of future is what keeps you in anxiety all the time. And when that fear, and I can't say I dropped it, I think the fear just dropped because of some realization. And when my fear dropped, when my fear of the future, my fear of financial stability and health and loneliness, these questions also dropped. So what I learned is that when you have people in your life who are doubting you, or who are posing questions which are bringing up defensiveness in you, it's time to pause and look within. What do you need to drop? And when you drop that, uh, the freedom you feel, the empowerment that you feel is absolutely unparalleled.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So we don't talk about the future, but we are. So what does the future look like? What have you got planned ahead? Let me put it that way.
Really speaking, nothing. In the sense that, because what I have learned in my life and what I truly live by is live in the present moment. And that's what actually dropped my fear, because I realized that if I can live in the present moment, every moment of my life, there is nothing called future. So I don't have to worry about it. Having said that, of course, one has to plan, like, because as one is aging, one has to think of where will you live, how will you live, how will you pay your bills. So whatever, you have to work some things out, some practical solutions out. At the moment, I don't have any answers. Fortunately, I am in fairly good health, because health, I think, becomes the biggest drawback when you are aging. And if you haven't taken care of your health in your younger days, then aging will definitely be difficult. So, fortunately for me, I think I have been lucky and I have been wise and I've made some very conscious choices. So I'm healthy. And so I see myself for the next, I don't know, 5, 10, whatever number of years there is. As much as I can travel, I would love to continue doing that, exploring new places, and building my digital presence as a life coach, reaching out to more and more women, creating a community of women who are able to live life from this expanded state and not be in the trap of emotional, uh, stuckness. Uh, that's what I
That's
really have
still,
no plan.
well, I think that's great. Those are great tips and a great way to live, because at the end of the day, you're right. You have to live in the moment. You have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to take everything in. I mean, I say to my children, don't buy stuff, create memories, take the moment, do this, because those are things that kind of are the biggest investment. And the future will take care of itself, really. Just as you said, take care of your health, and everything else will work through. So yeah, live in the moment. That's a really good point, really strong point. So let's move on to the bonuses. So what 5 tips would you give to somebody who's under 50?
So the first tip I would always say is invest in yourself. Always keep learning, growing, and when I say invest, I mean really taking care of your own emotional and spiritual growth. So if you want to study something, if you want to learn some arts and craft, whatever gives you happiness, but keep on. And in today's day and age, when there's so much change happening with technology, you have to keep yourself updated, because otherwise you will just lose out. So yes, first tip is always invest in yourself and never be scared to reinvent. Keep on reinventing yourself, because there is no template over here for you. There is no given template. Like they say, the world is your oyster. So spread your wings as much as you can, whatever you want to do. Second, I would say be fearless. I'll use a Hindi saying
Yeah.
over here, "Dar ke aage jeet hai." So whatever scares you, and this is what I've done in my life. Like I said, my solo trip was that. Whatever scares you, whatever feels like is the deepest fear you're feeling, face it. Just do it once, get over with it. You may or may not repeat it, but at least you've done it once and you know, okay, this is done now. And why is it important? Because life is uncertain. You have no idea what's going to come in front of you. But if you faced an unknown fear, then unknown fears will become simpler to face. Third, I would say, always surround yourself with people who are your tribe. So you need all kinds of people in your, I would say, committee. Create a committee for yourself. Somebody whose advice you appreciate and you will follow. Somebody who will pat you on your back when you do something good and hold up. People who will show you the true mirror, like people who are not just fair weather friends, but people who actually stick by you. And what you're receiving, give it back. Because, it's not just about taking, but it's also about giving. And the more you give, the more you receive. I mean, these are all laws of nature. So live from that space. Like you said earlier, we will trip. And I look at it from this perspective that whatever feels like a failure is just telling you what you're not supposed to do. So just change, just keep on looking at it and being positive. And I actually hold back to say being positive because just be real. It's not about false positivity that you're always being positive. No, just accepting life as it is from a positive frame of mind. Okay, fine, this hasn't gone my way. What is the good in this? And the final point I will say is learn to forgive first yourself and then everybody else who you think is responsible for what you're suffering. And just build on conscious gratefulness. You have to be consciously grateful. Not casually, but very specifically, consciously, with pure intention. Because intentions have a lot of power. They are very high in vibration. And like another thing which I've learned is whatever's happening in your life, you have manifested it, however good or bad that is. So that may not sit very well with everyone, because if they're going through tough times, they'll say, why did I manifest it? Because you were unconscious. Now become conscious and consciously manifest the kind of life that you would like to be.
Oh my God, they're so amazing tips. They are so amazing. Some of those really touched my heart when you were saying them. I think about the tripping up, about being conscious, being consciously grateful. I think that's a really big one. And, coming back to the trip thing, that not everything goes to plan, right? To be aware of that, and to have that kind of consciousness in being grateful, but also in manifesting whatever it is that you do want in your life. So thank you for those valuable tips. What about the 3 tips to anybody who's over 50? What would you say to them?
Somebody who's over 50 and is holding some fears, I would say, like I said earlier, face your fears. Here I would say most fears are thoughts. So can you become an observer of your thought and not get identified with it? Like for somebody over 50, the fear of loneliness, the fear of ill health, the fear of what will happen if something goes wrong in my life and there's no one around me. These are real. I mean, that's how life is today. So you have to invest your time, your energy, your presence in creating a community around you. So if you haven't started it already before 50, at 50, start doing it. Everybody says age is just a number. Actually, age is just a thought. You are as old as your thought. Like, what are you thinking? So when I'm 50, how should I behave? So there is no should. Mm-hmm. You behave as naturally as you would like to, and acknowledge your inner child, your inner being. We've actually lived all our life ignoring that small girl who was bereft or who was abandoned by ourselves. We only abandoned it because we were growing up, and that trauma that we went through, and all of us go through trauma, small or big. And somehow in that trauma, we just forget the little girl. So when you've turned 50 and you're facing your fears are actually coming from the fears of that little girl. So definitely spend time in healing yourself. And the more you do the inner healing work, the more you will find that you can occupy more space and be seen. I mean, I love your, your podcast name. We don't have to be invisible at all. We're not meant to be invisible. I think it's a disservice to the creator. I mean, if somebody comes and tells me that, I'm suffering or whatever, I says, do you know you're disrespecting the creator by telling the creator, giving the message that I am not good enough. You haven't created this piece that you've created is defective. It's not. So I would say, don't worry about age. Be as natural as you can. Do self-healing work and be around a very strong community of people who, who reflect your values, who live from your values, and just live happy.
Just so wonderful. When you said, there's so much beautiful things there, but when you said about, not being invisible and we're doing disservice to the creator, I mean, I say wholeheartedly, Preeta, like when people reflect on that and say back to me that, this is a beautiful title, I honestly just so humbled and honored and respected for that, because this idea came to me, and it probably was from the creator. It was a seed that was sown in my head, which I believed in right from the onset. And we are all about ensuring that no one is invisible. Well, especially women of over 50. I'm certainly not invisible. You're not invisible. Neither are anybody else, right? And this is about what the beauty of this is. So when people reflect back to me and appreciate, even why I'm doing what I'm doing, and the fact that you're on here is it's so heartwarming. It's so heartfelt, and all I can say is a thank you for that, because it's feedback coming back to me that what I'm doing, because I sometimes, like all of us, we question, what am I doing? Is it right? Am I doing the right thing, or am I on a crazy path? But this just gives me reassurance that what I'm doing, what you're doing, what everybody else is doing is actually the way we should be going. So thank you for that.
When I was taking the decision of walking out of my marriage, many of my friends who were in the same age bracket actually told me things like, what do you think will happen when you move out of the marriage? Will life suddenly become very beautiful? Doubted my decision. And I was a little foxed at that point, that these are my friends. These are people who understand me and who have seen me through my worst days. How can they not understand why I'm taking this decision? And one of my other friends told me, she said, actually, you are rocking their boat because you are taking a decision which they haven't been able to take. And they are, a little bit of the crab mentality, because, we are in this boat and, you're not really suffering. You're just imagining you're suffering. So you might as well stay here. Don't go out of this, And I feel that many women make that compromise because, yes, that comfort zone, however deprived you are of freedom, feels safer to them than taking the step where you are alone and I mean, there are obviously challenges in being alone, but I would not barter this for anything else. This is, I think, the best time of my life.
Oh, and what a perfect way to end a podcast like this, the best time of your life, Preeta, I am so grateful for you being here. And I say that, with a whole heart, because whoever's on here brings a different essence, a different side, a different perspective, which is so needed by different people who are listening to this podcast. And your wise words and your wisdom and sharing your story is so powerful. So all I can say is thank you for being here and, honoring me with your presence.
Thank you to you. I mean, thank you to Naveen for introducing the two of us, and thank you for creating this platform and giving me this opportunity and taking it forward with such wonderful women in your, in the earlier seasons that you've had so far.
Thank you very much, Preeta.
Power to you.
Thank you, Preeta, for being here. So let's keep connected. Let's talk and let's see where we go. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you for listening to the You Are Not Invisible After 50 podcast. If you want to hear more from some amazing women over 50 who are kicking ass and making impact, then don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, available on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember to rate, comment, and share with other fabulous women. And together, let's change the narrative that you don't have to be invisible, no matter how old you are. Check out our other services on www.you'renotinvisibleafter50.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And always remember that life doesn't have to end at 50. In fact, it's just beginning.